You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. So good to have you back here today on our Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday, where the topic is why your healthy foods are no longer filling you up in the same way. So I know that many of us out there right now are doing our absolute best to be eating healthier, trying to even buy organic when we can, and also try to do the same for our family. The problem is we don't oftentimes feel like we've either eaten enough or we're still hungry or we still don't have the energy that our bodies deserve. So I want to go over that today. I want to talk about the reasons for this, and believe it or not, it's been happening and happening slowly since about the 1950s. So I did talk about this in the rain barrel effect. I want this to be a refresher and then maybe even go a little bit deeper today. And then, of course, we always want to end the show not with what's wrong with the world, but the world that we live in is not always perfect. And that's what we find, right? Sometimes more now than ever. But what we're going to do is be able to find ways to still be healthy, live a healthy lifestyle, and then pass this information on to others. So what I'm talking about today is that since the 1950s, in World War II, we've been using a lot more synthetic fertilizer. Now, a lot of people, and again, I didn't know this either since I'm not an expert in fertilizer, that's for sure, and I'm not an expert in farming. So, I pretend that I know a little bit about gardening and things like that because I enjoy doing it a little bit during the summer. I enjoy it a lot, actually, but, I'm not an expert by any means, but I can do the research. And so I've looked deep into this when I was writing the rain barrel effect, and I also, of course, went back to what does the science say? Because when you do studies, now, again, you have to look at the reputation of the study because a lot of studies are done for a specific purpose, right? They're done to make a specific drug look good, pharmaceutical, seem that it's working, whatever it might be, right? Sometimes it's biased. But when we're looking at a negative result that certainly the largest concentrated farming organizations wouldn't want you to see, we can say, okay, all right, there's something to this. Let's check it out. Now, if you do go down the rabbit hole, you begin to look at the big difference between a natural fertilizer, and this is important. This is really important, and I'm going to get to it in a second, because if the nutrients, keep this in mind, if the nutrients aren't in the soil, they're never going to make it into your fruits and vegetables. And if those fruits and vegetables are fed to the animals that you may be eating as well, they're not going to have the nutrition either. So let's really pay attention to this, because organic fertilizers are things like manure and seaweed and, decaying bugs and worms like that on the ground. Really, really important. And you can use compost. You can use decaying plants. All of that works because as it decays, all of that compost and everything goes back into the soil. So all those minerals go back into the soil, right? But I've seen some statistics that show there's been at least a 5 to 10x increase also, whether it's organic or conventional. And conventional means that they're using pesticides and fungicides and herbicides, a lot of things that they're spraying on the plants. Well, here's what happens though. When you do that over time and you overplant your fields, which is what we've been doing now since the 1950s, it's not just the lack of what's in the soil and the synthetic fertilizers. We're planting more in the same space. So 5 to 10x the amount of yield from one, essentially called bushels per acre. And when you look at that data, you say, of course, because there's only so much soil, there's only so much nutrient in the soil, and now you're asking it to go into all of these plants. Well, the other thing is this. Most of the food that we're eating right now is conventional based, and that's, again, with all the harmful pesticides. And it's not made up of all of the natural macros, so the macros, the bigger minerals, as well as the micronutrients. Because for synthetic fertilizer, they have understood, and this is what they found, all they need to put back into the soil is some ammonium nitrate, ammonium phosphate, some other types of phosphate like superphosphate and potassium sulfate. So when you look at that, the nitrates, the phosphates, and the sulfates, they've realized that those are the big three that they can get away with, and they're very, very cheap. A lot of it left over from bomb making and things like that, like the nitrogen that we would use during the wars. So they said, oh, okay, what else can we use this for? A lot like soy, right? Now soy's in everything, corn's in everything. Cheap to produce, very, very cheap to produce, and look at what we can use it for. We can kind of force it into everything. Well, the truth is that plants, they need more than this, but they require 13 main nutrients. So when we look at that, the other nutrients besides those that I named are calcium and magnesium and sulfur. We look at boron and copper and iron and chloride and manganese and molybdenum and zinc. And these are things that not only do our bodies need, but the plants need them as well. They grow stronger with them. And when we use these synthetic fertilizers, a lot of times the plants are growing, but they have really weak roots. And again, no one's talking about this. But if you had harsher conditions, those plants with the weak roots would die a lot faster. And when they do die, the nutrition isn't added back to that soil. Oftentimes, they're just pulled right out of the fields. And they're not allowed to left to there and decay. And in the roots themselves, there's such a weak root structure, though the nutrients in the roots, because roots can have a lot of nutrients in them, there's nothing there. So they're not even left to decay really in the soil as well. So I thought this was really important. Just a couple other facts that I think that you should know about. And it's just these chemical fertilizers, the big three nutrients that I named, the phosphates and the nitrates, sulfates, is that they don't have the micronutrients. You're not going to get as much of the calcium, magnesium. I'm going to tell you how little there is right now in the soil, and I think you'll be shocked. And then also, when we are spraying all of these chemicals like fungicides and herbicides and pesticides, well, it's not conducive to a lot of, obviously, bugs, right? It's not conducive to them living in the soil, in the ecosystem. And the fertilizers don't provide the nutrients that they would need to in the soil. So it's not healthy soil, which means now you're really destroying the ecosystem. Well, we're not even going to get the discussion about the essentially migration and dying of bees, which we need for the pollination and we need for the ecosystem in general. But I'm talking about what's in the soil right now. And the synthetic fertilizers are not the answer to growing crops in a sustainable long-term manner. Okay, the other thing is this, is that chemical fertilizers, as I said before, end up weakening the crops in the long run. So what you find is that over a decade, the crop becomes weaker. There's less and less nutrients than 10 years ago. And that's because there's less now even in the soil themselves. So everything's already been leached out of the soil, and they don't give it what's called that old 3 or 4 field system. And I mentioned this before. There was a couple of questions on it. Again, I'm not an expert farmer by any means. I love reading the work of Joel Salatin, and I love reading about farming and old school methodologies in general, because you could basically create your own little ecosystem if you had enough land, and you don't even need that much land. But what they would do is they would have a spring crop and a winter crop. We'll call it a fall, early winter, for 2 different fields. And then what they would do is they would leave one field barren, and that field that didn't have anything planted in it for that season, essentially year, is they would then allow that to basically soak up the manure. They would have farm animals there. They would bring in compost, and they would let that soil rejuvenate. And this is an amazing thing. Now, again, every field we have essentially has big farming, and I get it, right? It's about how much money can you make per acre? I understand that from a capitalistic society, but what happens is it's short-term thinking. Just like us right now, is like we try to get away with as little sleep as possible, spending as little money as we can on good food. It's just that's the way it is, right? Like how long can we get away with not exercising? And that's because we're always looking at like, okay, well, what's right in front of us, right? What do we need to tackle? Because there's so many things in life. So I understand that. I get it, but I want to also look long-term. So if we were, though, to create a farming system, get back to that, like many people are doing, where some of that field is left to recover, the soil, the plants that grow in that, they're going to be super powered. We're going to get back to what we had before 1950. So I just thought that was remarkable looking at that research as well. And what I wanted to do with you too is simply share some of these statistics. I've heard things all over the map. Meaning like there's this, I think the book called Grass, Soil, and Hope that they found. This is in Australia. I'm going to give you some U.S. research. But they found in Australia that the vitamin A content of carrots had dropped by about 99%. And I don't even see how that's possible. That's just so much. And in the UK, it was cited that all vegetables had seen copper, so the mineral copper, it was reduced by 76%, calcium by 46%, and iron by 27%, while magnesium was down 24% and potassium down by 16%. And this was a UK study that was done over a 50-year period from 1940 to 1990. So I want to go over another one. This is done in the US, and this one I'm going to link up the PubMed study. So the scientific study on it. The scientific study was actually published in 2004, so 15 years ago. I mean, imagine what it is right now, right? So it's called Changes in USDA Food Composition Data for 43 Garden Crops from 1950 to 1999. So think of it as another 50-year study. Okay, published in 2004. It was published by the Journal of American College of Nutrition, obviously a very reputable journal, right? There's not too many that you would consider more reputable than that. So we know we're looking at a good source overall. Well, let's take a look at this, and I'm going to go over the GMO foods and why that's happening in just a second. But again, this was looked at 43 different fruits and vegetables, and it was considered reliable data, right? It was reliable data that they would use for any other study. And they found that five specific minerals: calcium, phosphorus, iron, riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, used for energy and mitochondrial health as well as vitamin C, dramatically declined. So we know that at least those five minerals, plus, believe it or not, protein went down by 6%. It's amazing. That's in fruits and vegetables. So we know that they're not even supposed to be high protein-based foods when we look at it at a normal serving, like a cup worth, but protein went down by 6%. That's a weakening of the crop. Don't think of protein as, I need protein to build muscle or whatever it might be. Think of protein as structure. Think of protein as strength, because that's what it's used for, right? This is really, really important. It's also used for enzymatic-based transformations in the plant. So this is an overall weakening of the plant. And if the plant has less calcium and phosphorus, well, you're going to have less nutrients to build up your bones. Extremely important. And then also, if it has less iron and riboflavin, well, it's not going to have as much of what we need for energy, cellular repair, oxygen, and adrenal-based fuel as well. Okay, and that goes with vitamin C too. Vitamin C, crucial for our immune system, crucial to fight cancer, crucial for detox. These are things that we absolutely do need, very important. Other things they found is this. In the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry, it showed that organic apples, so this is really important. Now remember, organic apples have far more antioxidants, which help to squelch free radicals, which helps with inflammation and aging. But even organic apples declined by 15%. Okay, actually, here's the data on this. Organic food is declining in mineral ratio as well. But the study said this. It actually has 15% more, though, than conventional-based food. So when people say, well, there's no point in purchasing organic because it's the same carbs, fat, and protein, they're only talking about macronutrients. They're missing out on the world of data of micronutrients. Macronutrients are fat, protein, and carbs. That's not what prevents heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, stroke, all of the big causes of mortality. It is phytonutrients, plant-based antioxidants that allow our body to squelch free radicals, to decrease inflammation so we don't... remember, most diseases of the body have inflammation or a growth in inflammation, meaning a filling up of that rain barrel over time, as part of the disease process. So we need those brightly colored fruits and vegetables. One of the reasons why they're not as brightly colored is because they contain less antioxidants. And again, this means organic as well. Now, organic, though, usually a far greater percentage, though, still, of micronutrients with their minerals and antioxidants. So yes, people can tell you it's the same fats, carbs, and protein in conventional food as organic, but remember, organic has a couple big pluses. Typically more micronutrients, more antioxidants, again, for the aging process and dis-ease process. But also, what it has is not the harmful pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides that we know can lead to cancer. So there's very distinct and important distinctions. So go back though, if you can't purchase all organic because it's more expensive, I understand. But also the reason why to purchase organic is to support your local farmers. Ideally, you're buying local organic whenever possible. Ideally, you're buying from farmers markets. And the reason why you do that is that they're usually practicing better methods. And a lot of times they're organic, even if they haven't gotten certified, so you can talk with them. What do you use for pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, right? So you want to look at that and you want to support them because there's more likely also more of those nutrients in there. Now, again, look at the quality of the vegetables. You don't want to look at the shine. The shine is usually added with the wax, chlorines, like all sorts of different things. Oftentimes, organic food's a little uglier, right? And that I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that it's misshapen. There's sometimes some brown spots on things. Now, that is more natural. That's how it grows in nature. Everything doesn't look like it's been sprayed in a greenhouse with a gas, right? We don't want that. But what we want, though, is when we look at those tomatoes and we look at those apples and everything else, we see a hearty fruit or vegetable. And that's what we want because we want to bring that heartiness inside that fruit or vegetable into our body, right? We are becoming the food that we eat. We can never forget that. We are becoming the food that we eat if our digestive system is working properly. That's a big if, right? Make sure your digestive system is working better. But also, let's also look at that we could be short in the calcium, the iron, the B2, but also the magnesium, zinc, B6, and vitamin E. We've seen that begin to decline as well. I'm going to give you a couple more statistics, and then I'm going to give you how we can make this all right in the world. All right. It's called the Organic Consumers Association, cites several of its own studies. I don't like to go as much into those because, again, it's put on by the Organic Consumers Association. Even though I believe them, I don't want to seem biased. But what we're looking at from Kushi Institute analysis, we looked at the data over a period of 23 years, and it found that calcium levels declined in 12 different vegetables by 27%, iron levels by 37%, vitamin A levels here in the US by 21%, vitamin C levels by 30%. And then I went over the UK one that was published in the British Food Journal. That was data from 1930 to 1980. And it looked at the decline as well of the calcium and iron and potassium. So the big thing they found too is that tomatoes, again, tomatoes are an important one because those are heavily sprayed, right? But if we look at organic methods, it contains more phenolic compounds. You've heard about me talk about this before with olive oil, and it are these polyphenols that help to kill cancer cells and help to prevent cancer. Now, I'm not saying that this is a cure-all, but you want to use these things in your daily life. The next problem is this, GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Remember, when you see GMO foods, and I would love you to go back to the podcast on GMOs that I did, as well as how to read your labels, okay? So we'll try to link that up today if possible. We're going to try to find that one, but you can go find all the previous podcasts right at stephencabral.com/podcasts. And today's is episode 1314, stephencabral.com/1314. And I also talk about GMO foods, I believe, on page 47 in the Rain Barrel. And I go through the top GMO foods, such as beets and beet sugar, canola oil, cottonseed oil, soy, corn, Hawaiian papaya, and now they're even starting to GMO alfalfa, zucchini, squash, flax, and even salmon. They're starting to genetically modify actual fish. It's just unbelievable. Well, let's take a look at what it's done. When I'm looking at these studies right here, this one was posted on Moms Across America, and it showed that non-GMO corn, so non-GMO, which means more, let's call it, we don't have to call it organic, but it means non-GMO, has 6,130 parts per million of calcium, while GMO corn has 14. So non-GMO corn has 437 times more calcium. So again, use this information when people tell you that GMOs don't matter. They do. There's no nutrition in them besides what they use to essentially infect the food with a virus to create a new organism. Besides that, right, and the metal they use as well, besides that, there's essentially hardly any nutrition. GMO corn, 113 parts per million of magnesium. GMO corn has 2. That's 56 times more magnesium in non-GMO corn. GMO corn has 113 parts per million of potassium. GMO corn has 7. So non-GMO corn has 16 times more potassium. And non-GMO corn has 14 parts per million of manganese. GMO corn only has 2 parts of manganese. 7 times more in non-GMO. And the last one, important as well, non-GMO corn is 20 times richer in overall nutrition, energy, and protein to GMO corn. Extremely, extremely important to look at these facts. These are clinically significant facts, and it means that if you do not believe the quality of the food that you're eating matters, you are missing out most likely on about a third, somewhere between 25% and 40% of your nutrition in minerals per day, which means you need to eat an extra, let's say, 1/3, right? Another 33% more food, fruits and vegetables, if you're not getting organic. That's essentially the bottom line. You need to be eating another about 3 cups per day. So let's put it into real terms. If you're trying to get your 7 to 9 cups a day of fruits and vegetables, which you should, and you choose not to purchase mainly organic, and again, I have no dog in the race. Like, this is not me saying, oh, I have stock in organic food, so let me promote it. No, I'm promoting health. And I know it costs a little bit more. I understand that. It does. But you are getting, though, if you look at it this way, would it really be the same price, though, if you had to eat another 33%? If you had to eat 3 more cups a day of fruit and vegetables, which again is a lot more food to eat in the first place, would it really be any cheaper? I would probably say maybe just a little bit. Like, if it's 50% more right now, would it be that big a difference? Well, now we're looking at what? What is that? I can't even do the math on that. 27%? I mean, 27 off. So another 27% would get you there. Or actually 17%. Okay, so that's all it would be, 17% more. So then you start to see, okay, that's a lot less. And just the fact that you can actually get more nutrition with less food is a huge thing. It's what I try to preach on a daily basis. It's also why I'm such a big proponent of a smoothie. If you put in 1 or 2 cups of berries in that, you can put in your veggies too if you want to blend it all up. Or you can use some of the daily nutritional or the daily fruit and vegetable blend that we recommend. That's an extra couple cups of veggies right there. All it is vegetables and fruit that's been juiced and then dehydrated, right? So you're just getting the dehydrated powder without the sugar or anything added. So it's a really nice way to get it too. But here's the thing. You have to get it. Because now, more than ever, with more toxins in the environment, we need more nutrition. So now we have more toxins in the environment. Pesticides are a big one. Fungicides, herbicides on our food, right? And if you can't get organic all the time, go back to my show on the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen, okay? So the Dirty Dozen never eat conventional based. The Clean 15, well, if you can't buy all organic, then those ones are better off bought than non-organic, okay? Still better, all organic, but if you can't do them all, I get it, I understand. Go for the Clean 15 then as the ones that you purchase non-organic. What I'm looking at, though, is how do we fight back against the world that we live in? And we do it in a way where we are keeping our bodies safe. That's the most important thing to me. That's the most important thing I share with you, is that if we're living in a toxic world, we need more of these polyphenols from fruits and vegetables, the brightly colored fruits and vegetables. Meat's not going to do it, fat's not going to do it, and grains, those types of things aren't really going to do it. It's fruits and vegetables, right? So whatever diet you're on, you have to be able to get behind those. You have to get behind your 7 to 9 cups, and you can do more, but 7 to 9 cups of fruits and veggies every day. If you're worried about the glycemic index of your food, all right, let's go to berries, cherries, raspberries, blackberries, wild blueberries, kiwi. All of those are great. Okay, so let's look, though, at getting as much organic produce into our diet as we can, while at the same time supplementing if we need to, which is what I recommend, just to make sure you're covering your bases. Because you can be eating the best diets in the world, but as you're seeing, the nutrient levels are going down since 1950, which is why I recommend the daily foundational protocol. You can look at the labels and you can use whatever your favorite brand is. I formulate for Equilibrium Nutrition, but maybe you are in a country we don't even ship to, or maybe you're under your doctor's supervision and care and you're going to use the ones they recommend. All of that's great. What I try to do is bring you the information. What you choose to do with that is your choice. And I know that you're trying to make the best choices out there. What I can say is we do back ours up with third-party testing. We make sure it's in there because it's what I use for myself in my clinical practice and with my family. But what I want you to do is this. Focus always on whole food first. Make sure you're getting 7 to 9 cups of fruit and veggies every day, ideally organic. Keep those nutrients up to fight back against heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, okay? Keep those up. If you need a little help, well, and if you want to cover your bases, that's when you'll add in some good functional medicine-based nutritional supplements. Hopefully this has been helpful, and this is the reality that we live in. It's not something we should ever be afraid of. We shouldn't be scared. We shouldn't get angry, but we have to be aware, and that's what this podcast is all about. Do feel free to pass this information along to anyone else you believe it can serve. I believe that the more people who know this information, the more people will support their local farmers markets, the more people that will buy organic, and that's where the trend will go. If that's where the trend is going, and less people are purchasing these toxic forms of fruit and vegetables that are highly sprayed and GMO, well, there's going to be less of that in the world. That's my opinion. I hope it comes true. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. I'll talk with you soon. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.